Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the person you thought you were just isn't there in the same way. Your job feels strangely hollow. Conversations sound like a script. The roles you've played for decades, good partner, reliable friend, high performer, suddenly feel like costumes you forgot to take off. You didn't go on a retreat. You didn't chant in a cave. You weren't even looking for enlightenment. And yet something in you has snapped or cracked open or fallen away. This is what it can feel like when awakening happens without permission, when the deeper truth of who you are breaks through the surface of your life, uninvited and unstoppable. It can be beautiful, yes, but it can also be terrifying, destabilizing, and lonely. In this video, we're going to talk honestly about that side of awakening, the messy, human, unsanitized version that doesn't fit on an inspirational quote card. When people talk about spiritual awakening, they usually show you the highlight reel: bliss, peace, cosmic love. But for many, the first taste of awakening feels less like a honeymoon and more like an earthquake, especially when it arrives out of nowhere. You're not trying to be spiritual, you're just living your life. And suddenly life won't let you live it the old way. In this video, we'll explore what happens when awakening crashes, the party uninvited, how it disrupts identities, jobs, relationships, and mental health, and why that's not a sign you're broken or failing. We'll unpack the mechanics of the shift, the common pitfalls, and practical ways to ground and integrate. If you've ever thought, something is happening to me and I don't have a name for it, stay with me until the end. And if you find this kind of honest spirituality useful, consider subscribing and turning on the notification bell so you don't miss future deep dives. Let's define what I mean by awakening happens without permission. I'm not talking about a single grand enlightenment event where you float off into permanent bliss. I'm pointing to those moments, sometimes sudden, sometimes gradual, when your sense of being a separate, solid me starts to loosen, and reality reveals itself as far more spacious, interconnected, and mysterious than you believed. Often this comes with a felt shift, a sudden quiet in the mind, a perception that everything is happening on its own, or a deep knowing that I am not this story I've been telling. What makes it without permission is that it's not driven by your conscious spiritual seeking. It shows up during grief, burnout, a panic attack, a random walk, even scrolling your phone. Your life hasn't been arranged around spiritual practice, yet something in you wakes up anyway, and it does not politely ask if you're ready. From the inside, an uninvited awakening can feel like you've been unplugged from the old operating system. Familiar motivations dry up. The carrot and stick logic of your life, achievement, approval, security, no longer moves you the way it used to. You might feel oddly detached from your own story, like you're watching a movie instead of starring in it. Some people describe it as suddenly waking up from a dream. The world looks the same, but something fundamental is different. Colors might feel more vivid. Silence can feel full. The background of awareness becomes unmistakable. And along with that, the old identity, your name, history, roles, feels strangely thin. This can be exhilarating. It can also be deeply disorienting. You may wonder, am I going crazy? Is this depersonalization? Is this awakening? Is it both? Part of this journey is learning that those questions themselves are natural, and that inner confusion is often a sign of outer structures dissolving. The shock often begins with identity. Awakening without permission rips the Velcro between who I think I am and what's actually happening. Maybe you've always been the achiever, the caretaker, the rebel, the spiritual skeptic. Suddenly those labels feel paper thin. You can still play the roles, but they no longer feel like the truth of you. This identity unraveling can trigger grief and fear. If I'm not this role, then who am I? If my career, religion, or relationship no longer defines me, what holds my life together? Society rewards stable, predictable identities. When yours starts dissolving, friends and family may feel unsettled. They might say, "You've changed," or "You're not yourself lately." when actually, for the first time, you're touching something more authentic. The key is understanding that this is not failure. It's a natural side effect of seeing through a lifelong costume. The old self isn't wrong, it's just no longer the whole story. One of the most destabilizing parts of uninvited awakening is the emotional and psychological turbulence that can follow. When the old sense of self loosens, suppressed material often rushes to the surface. Childhood wounds, unresolved grief, shame, anger, existential terror. It's like the basement lights turning on after decades in the dark. This can look and feel like anxiety spikes, panic attacks, derealization, or depression. From a medical perspective, those labels may be accurate, and if you're suffering, professional help is important. But from an awakening perspective, there's also another layer. Your system is reorganizing around a deeper truth, and everything that doesn't fit is being flushed out. The danger is romanticizing this as just spiritual, or, on the flip side, pathologizing it as only mental illness. Often it's both, psychological content arising in the light of an awakening process. Honor the human level with grounded support while respecting that something larger is also moving. Awakening without permission often collides with trauma. If your nervous system has learned to survive through hypervigilance, people-pleasing, or numbing out, a sudden expansion of awareness can feel overwhelming, even violent. Instead of spacious peace, you might feel flooded. Too much sensation, too much presence, too much truth all at once. This is where a trauma-informed lens is essential. Awakening doesn't delete your conditioning, it exposes it. The light that reveals your deeper nature also highlights unprocessed pain. When that happens, go gently. Slowness is not resistance, it's wisdom. Grounding practices, feeling your feet, noticing breath in the belly, orienting to the room, aren't less spiritual. They're how awakening becomes safe enough for your body. Sometimes you may need to temporarily de-emphasize spiritual inquiry and focus on regulation, therapy, or medication. That's not a step backward. Awakening isn't a race to abandon humanity. It's an invitation for your humanity to be held in a wider love, at a pace your system can actually handle. Another hallmark of uninvited awakening is what feels like ego backlash. After moments of clarity or spaciousness, the personality structure often snaps back with extra force. Old addictions flare up, self-criticism gets louder, petty dramas feel irresistible. You might think, I've lost it. That opening was fake. But often, this is a defensive response from the ego trying to reassert control. Imagine living your whole life as the CEO of Me Inc., and then suddenly discovering there is no central office, just a mysterious, intelligent process unfolding. Of course, the old management panics. Backlash can show up as spiritual doubt, cynicism, or a rush back into distraction and busyness. The key is not to demonize the ego. It's a protective strategy built over years. Instead, notice it with curiosity. Ah, this is the system trying to rebalance. That simple recognition already comes from a deeper awareness that doesn't need the ego to disappear to be free. Many people who awaken without permission find themselves plunged into what mystics call the dark night. This isn't just ordinary sadness, it's like the meaning has been drained out of your previous life. Practices that once inspired you feel flat. Relationships feel misaligned. The old pleasures don't quite land, and the new depth hasn't stabilized yet. It can feel like being suspended between worlds, too awake to fully believe your old story, not yet integrated enough to live from the new one. Doubt, spiritual dryness, and a sense of abandonment by life or God are common. You might ask, why did this start if I wasn't going to be supported? In many traditions, this phase is understood as a purification, the stripping away of subtle spiritual ambition, images of enlightenment, and unconscious bargaining. It's excruciating because it burns through the last hopes of using awakening to improve the ego, making room for a simpler, quieter truth to emerge. Because awakening without permission rarely matches the romanticized versions you see online. A huge part of the struggle is simply the lack of a map. You might Google symptoms, bounce between spiritual forums and psychology articles, and still feel like no one is describing exactly what you're going through. This is where language matters. Naming it as an awakening process with destabilization can shift the narrative from "I'm broken" to "something profound is happening and I need support." You're not failing at spirituality because you're anxious, confused, or still triggered. You're undergoing a complex reconfiguration. Find stories that feel honest, not idealized. People who talk about panic and grief alongside insight and love. Pay attention to what lands in your body as relief or recognition. That's usually a clue that you're hearing a description from the same territory you're walking, even if the details differ. Having a map doesn't fix the journey, but it can keep you from thinking you're the only one on the road. So, how do you live practically when awakening barges in? First, simplify. When your inner world is in upheaval, outer life doesn't need to be maximized. Reduce non-essential commitments where possible. Prioritize sleep, nourishment, and a few relationships where you can be radically honest. Second, ground in small, sensual details. Feeling water on your hands when washing dishes. Noticing sounds in the room. Savoring a single bite of food. These aren't distractions from awakening. They're ways for spacious awareness to gently inhabit the body and the moment. Third, be transparent with at least one person if you can, a therapist, spiritual mentor, or trusted friend. You don't have to unload esoteric language. You can simply say, "My sense of self is changing and it's disorienting. I might need extra patience." Practicality isn't a betrayal of the sacred. It's how the sacred expresses itself as rent paid on time, bodies cared for, and relationships tended even amidst vast inner change. Boundaries become crucial when awakening happens without permission. As your sensitivity increases, environments and conversations that once felt neutral might now feel draining or even painful. You may notice that certain relationships are built almost entirely on mutual distraction or shared illusions. Setting boundaries isn't about judging others as less awakened. It's about recognizing what your system can realistically handle right now. That might mean limiting time with certain people, opting out of gossip, or saying no to extra projects while you stabilize. You can frame it simply: "I'm going through a big internal shift and need more quiet time," without needing everyone to understand the metaphysics. Some will support you. Some may feel threatened. Both reactions are okay. Remember, boundaries create the container in which awakening can ripen instead of constantly re-traumatizing you. They're not walls around your heart. They're like a greenhouse that protects a fragile young plant until its roots are strong enough for storm. Over time, the rawness of awakening without permission can soften into a quieter, more embodied knowing. You begin to see that the spacious awareness you tasted in dramatic moments is also present while you answer emails, change diapers, or sit in traffic. The extraordinary hides in the utterly ordinary. Integration means letting the insight, "there is no separate me," coexist with the practical truth that you still need to show up as a responsible human. You pay taxes, keep promises, and own your mistakes. Not because you're re-identifying with a false self, but because love expresses itself as reliability and care. You may never get a neat story about why awakening crashed into your life when it did, but you start to sense that even the chaos had an intelligence. The life you're living now might be simpler, less glamorous, but it feels truer. The permission you didn't get at the beginning, over time, you realize life itself was the one giving it. Let's distill the key points. Awakening without permission isn't a glitch. It's a natural eruption of a deeper intelligence that doesn't always wait for our plans. It often begins by loosening our fixed identity, which can feel like loss, confusion, or even madness, but is actually a doorway. This process frequently stirs up unresolved trauma, psychological material, and ego backlash. None of that means you're doing it wrong. It means light is touching places that have long been in shadow. Trauma-informed care, therapy, medication, And simple grounding are not obstacles to awakening. They're often its allies. Practically, this path asks for simplification, honest support, and strong yet flexible boundaries. Over time, the dramatic highs and lows can mellow into a more stable, embodied presence, where awakening is less about experiences and more about how you live, love, and tell the truth in daily life. You're not behind. You're not alone. You're in the messy middle of a very human transformation. If this video has put words to something you've been quietly going through, let that recognition land. You don't have to turn your awakening into a project or a performance. Your only job is to keep telling the truth to yourself, to trusted others, and to life itself. If you'd like more content that treats spirituality with nuance, honesty, and psychological depth, you're invited to stick around. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and explore the other videos after this, especially if you're in the thick of a spiritual crisis and need more maps and companions. In the comments, you're welcome to share as much or as little of your experience as feels safe. You might be surprised how many people quietly recognize themselves in your story. Above all, remember, awakening didn't ask your permission because at some deep level, it was never separate from you. The life that feels like it's falling apart may be the one finally falling into place.